it leads to some community issues. It leads to animal issues. It leads to low garbage that are unsightly conditions, which, from a community appearance and aesthetic point of view, really just there's a better way. Also, there's some economic conditions. I guess you could say it's a given or a standard that operating costs will continue to increase. It can be assumed they have been and probably will continue to. Operating budgets will continue to be tight. And on top of that, we have changing landscape in terms of environmental mandates. So the landscape changes as far as waste, how it's handled, what's acceptable, what isn't acceptable, the regulations that are attached to that waste. So flexibility becomes very important. The other thing, and it's important to remember in our case, the worker issue, as far as the safety issue, we have exposure to workers' compensation risk. We've had, over the years, we've had many examples. We've had many this year. We currently have an employee who's off with a workers' comp-related injury. There have been a few before him this year. Injuries are very common. Minor injuries, we've had eye injuries, we've had knees, backs, elbows, things like that. Very common with heavy and repetitive lifting. Again, because of the physical and manual nature of the job. The worker's pool too. I think it's important to factor in. And it's not just the city of Steubenville, it's not just refuse collection, it's pretty much across the country. Our worker pool is changing. The workers are getting older. Our current employees are getting older. And we're also seeing a change in terms of applicants. I remember years ago when the city would open applications or have to test, there would be 100, 200 people that would take a civil service exam. The last time applications were opened up by civil service, I believe we had about 12 applicants. Those applicants typically were in their 40s and 50s. And we've seen a significant change in not only the number of people applying for these types of jobs, but also the age of the applicants. And our employees continue to get older. It's a tough job. It's a physical job for someone who is in their middle years. And I don't know that that's going to change. So again, our existing employees and our applicant base seems to be changing. So we have a situation, I think, facing us as an organization that we, looking to the future, we may need to consider and investigate other ways of doing what it is we need to do. That's where modernization comes in. The idea with modernization is that we can address many, if not all, of those factors. As far as the safety consideration, it's a more automated process. So we're taking a lot of the heavy and repetitive lifting out of the so the workers are expected to perform that type of physical labor on an ongoing repetitive basis. We're putting the worker in the safety of the vehicle. So we've had a few close calls. We've had employees grazed. We've had them nicked by mirrors. We've had near misses in the roadway. We've also seen an increase in that with distracted driving as cell phone use has increased, and that type of issue, we see that more and more. So we improve worker safety. In doing that, we can reduce workers' compensation costs, or at least reduce our risk, reduce our exposure to that risk. We put the employee in the safety of the vehicle as opposed to in the roadway. We remove the employee from the contact, the physical proximity with the waste, so that they're not exposed to environmental hazards. We also can address the issue of community appearance and how the city looks on garbage day. A modernized collection process would include carts, containerized waste as opposed to loose waste, or a variety of bags. That eliminates a lot of the loose and blowing garbage. That gives the community a much more clean and uniform look. So we also get the better position as budgets continue to be tight. As operating expenses increase and budgets remain tight, no one, speaking with relative confidence, this council, and I don't anticipate any council that may follow it, is going to be crazy about the idea of being faced with the possibility of having to raise rates or do things like that to offset budget issues. So we get better position as those things occur, meaning increased operating expenses, tight operating budgets, and changing environmental mandates. We're better positioned with an automated process or a modernized process to adapt and accommodate the changes that may need to happen in the waste stream, how waste is handled, where waste goes, what's permitted, what's not, those types of things. So the idea here is that if the city were to pursue, or desire to pursue a different process, a different method of collecting and handling solid waste, we can accomplish that. It's important for council to understand that in doing so, it's a lengthy process, and there is resistance. Most communities, all communities, just about, who have made this transition, and that transition, by the way, has begun decades ago. Most progressive communities and industry leaders have begun making this process, this change, this transition back in the early 90s. So many have already been doing it for decades. Everyone else is kind of going that way. It is now the industry standard. It is the industry best practice as far as how things are done. But every community that's gone that way, that's gone through the transition, has encountered some challenges. And it's important for council to understand that we will be no different. It's a change. It's a change in process and the way we do things. It will require some changes as far as legislation. It will require some changes as far as policy. And it will require some changes in what's expected of our residents and how waste is handled. Each of those things would be addressed in time and due course. It would involve a significant investment of money. The equipment involved is expensive. Takes a long time to acquire. And many things have to be designed into the system so that you can implement. So with that in mind, I'd be happy to answer any questions or elaborate further. That's a brief synopsis, if you will, or a summary of the information that council had been provided previously. I may not have touched on all the points, but in order to move forward, we would need, I would say, a clear indication from council that this is something you would like to pursue or that you see value in. And then I'd be happy to provide some further information as far as specific components, timeframes, implementation, costs, so forth. Again, it's fairly involved. There's going to be a lot of components, and each one would need to be addressed in turn. Is there any questions that I can answer at this point that anybody has?
Well, I think we all do. So just go across, and then I'll finish up. Go ahead, Bob, first.
My question, now we're talking, these aren't the side loaders we're talking about behind the truck where the worker has to move them out to the truck, or?
Actually, in the end, probably both. The city of Steubenville, the geography of the city of Steubenville poses some challenges. As this conversation has played out over the years, I've heard different comments and references that people have witnessed it in action. People have been somewhere on vacation in another community, somewhere where they've seen this process in action. They've lived it. They've seen the carts, they've seen the trucks go down the street. Some communities have an advantage in that regard, meaning they're newer, they're flatter, their streets are wider, they don't have as much on-street parking. There's a lot of logistical issues. I believe the city of Steubenville, in my opinion, would ultimately need a kind of a hybrid system, which would be both what would be called fully automated, where it would be a side loader, where one man can do the job. And then we would have areas of the city that would require what they call semi-automated, where still utilizing a cart, still utilizing the mechanical lifting concept, but you would still need a man to get out of the truck and get that cart over to the tipper and get it in the truck.
Does one truck have that capability, Bob, or is this, are we talking, there has to be two types of trucks?
Ultimately, the city would need more than one type of truck to do it right. Meaning, the fully automated trucks are, if you've seen them and if you're familiar with them, and I'd be happy to provide examples of the different types of equipment, they're very large. And they're designed and well suited to drive down larger, wider main roads, high traffic areas. To try and get that truck into a small, tight alley or something is just ill-advised.
But with one pack, is there such a thing as a packer that can do both?
Dual purpose,
Yes.
side and rear.
There is, and the equipment available is there. There's a very wide array. And part of this process, and it's an excellent question, because part of this process, in any good process, is applying the right tool to the job, so to speak. You wouldn't use a hammer to turn a screw, and you wouldn't use a screwdriver to pound a nail. It's very important that you have the right application of equipment and process for the job at hand. And I don't mean to be vague, but collecting garbage on Sunset Boulevard is an entirely different process or thing than trying to get garbage from one of these dead-end alleys somewhere. It's very tight. So ultimately, the city would have a variety, more than one type of truck. Smaller, more nimble trucks suited for the alleys, and then the larger, fully automated trucks for the major roads. And when I say major roads, I don't say major roads in the same sense of the word that we refer to major roads from another community standard or point of view. When we refer to our major corridors, in one sense, we're talking about Sunset Boulevard, State Route 7, the University Boulevard, the major high traffic areas. That's not to say that that's the same list of streets for garbage collection. We have a lot of streets, and you can almost visualize them. As you drive down the north side of Sunset, you've got, you can go all the way in Oxford, Broadway, you can get all the way around Alexander Manor, the Cunningham, Westwood area, Hiddenwood, all the way around Great Barton. You can envision driving that street, and you can get a large truck in, around, and back out. When you start looking at the little streets where you have to get in, you're dead end, you're trying to pull a three-point turner back all the way out of the street. Right. So when I say a major street, those streets where a large truck can drive in, complete the circuit, do the route, and drive right back out. And there's many. There's many where that definition fits. There's many where that circumstance exists. And then there's also much smaller, tighter streets. So ultimately, now, this is why I say it gets to be a discussion, because what some communities have done is they've really gone to the resident. I'm not saying we should, I'm just saying we can drastically modernize our collection process and really not impact the resident any more than necessary. What I mean by that, garbage collection still would occur in the same way, you still put your trash out at the same place kind of thing. So life doesn't change that too much for the residents. There are communities that have geography problems, that have height issues and tight streets, and they've gone as far as saying, you no longer put the trash out in the back of the house. all the trash has to be put in the front of the house. And you're not allowed to park on the street on trash day. And if you live on the odd side of the street, you have to put it across the street on the even side of the street because that's where the truck comes across the street. So I'm not saying that that's what we should do. What I'm saying is you can really go into this, okay? And some communities have really gone at the residents and said, you know, this is how it's going to work. I feel that the city of Steubenville doesn't have to do that. We can still conduct the operation. We can still perform the work in much the same way as it's being done now, from the residents' point of view, with a better process, with a better method, without really turning trash day upside down for the residents of the city. So, back to your original question. In the end, to do the job right, to do the job well, you would have certain trucks serving certain types of locations, certain routes, and a different type of equipment that's better suited to the other.
Would we still need a regular packer that we have now in certain areas? Like what comes to my mind is like Main Street, George Street.
Ideally, we would have actually a smaller packer than we have now. Yeah.
My last question for you is, would this be compatible if we, down the road, if we decide we want to get a compactor or something?
Absolutely. It actually goes kind of hand in glove with that idea. Yep. And that's where, you can really start gaining efficiencies. And I'll just go back again and say, there's a lot that goes into this. There's a lot of moving parts, and I don't want to get too far down the path before we should. But the idea here is with a compactor, with automated truck, okay, a standard rear load packer of minor collection like we do. We can hit each truck and hit about 750 stops in a day. So that method that we employ with that truck and 3 men can service 750 stops or residences in a day. 1 man in an automated truck can service somewhere in the neighborhood of about 15 to 1700. Now, when you have that kind of speed and that kind of efficiency, and you factor in a nice convenient drop off like a compactor, you're really gaining efficiencies.
It's compatible, so I want
Yes,
to make
it's
sure.
absolutely compatible and part of the overall plan.
Thank you, Paul.
Bob, before I go on to touch on exactly what Bob was just saying, you talked about going from 750 to 1,500, which leads me to mention and ask two-part question dealing with, one, several communities I know of do 2 times a week pickup. Has that been a thought? And or 2, we have, as administration and council, talked about 4-day work week and utilizing the force for other, needs. So that would also give us that approach to really being able to do that. So can you elaborate on those 2?
Yes, and I guess as the conversation unfolds, there's a lot of options, and for every, it's almost one of those things like for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, so to speak. So we would have to decide what to do with that capacity. Yes, we've talked about going to a 4-day collection schedule. How to utilize that capacity. That is absolutely a byproduct of more efficiency, better operating principles. Ultimately, how it's applied would be determined.
Willie Long, Kenny, Mayor, so Willie, I'll just go right across.
I understand your age, thing. That's why I said it. Our average age over in the mill is 59 and a half years old. So when we rely on ergonomics, you talk about economics, appearance, community, also ergonomics. Ergonomically, you're helping the worker. And I think it's a great idea because you're eliminating the sprains and strains. Some of the things you talked about, back, elbows.
Correct.
And I was, what Bob asked about the rear and side loader, I remember when we tried our pilot program in Buena Vista with the recycling program, and there was a street up in Buena Vista, the one Tony Deere lives on, they could not have the side loader because of you had to snake through the street.
Too big.
Yeah, it was too big. But if it's a dual purpose, that would be perfect. I mean, you can take it. And if you recall, when we did do that, I think it was the JV Green team supplied the can.
Yes.
Would we have to go that route? We have to
Yes.
supply the can, okay. That's what I want to know, because you're going to have a can to go with us, right? So our paparazzi can pick it up and, okay. How will that be funded? Through our, we would do it.
Typically, the communities that have implemented this program, the can is provided by the provider. We are the provider.
Good, okay.
So there are communities, as you know, that have privatized or commercial collection, and those cans or carts are provided by the company collecting the waste.
Okay, yeah.
In communities like ours, where it's provided by the municipality provides the can. So yes, that would be our property.
Okay.
Just to give you an example, this is typically how it gets rolled out or how it's done. The cans are assigned to an address. They're purchased by the city and provided to the resident. And they are assigned to an address. And the can stays assigned to that address. So if the Paul family moves into 123 Main Street, that can is assigned to 123 Main
So
Street.
move with me.
No,
Oh.
when the Paul family moves out, the Villa Magna family moves in, the can stays at 123 Main Street. And that is
Makes sense.
it's city equipment out there. It requires monitoring, and there's various ways to do that, not to get too far ahead. But the cans are all serialized. Most of them today, and I would strongly consider it, have RFID tag identification in them, so that you can point a gun at it, and you know exactly what can that is and where it belongs.
Strong wind comes when he gets his can blown all the way down the street, you can.
You find a stray can out there, you can identify the can, you know exactly where it came from and where it belongs. So yes.
Okay. I got two other questions. How are our present factors? I think, did we just purchase them when we first came on? Tommy,
Our present packers, we still have one of our old packers in service. It's hanging in there, but it's not. We purchased 3 new packers. They are 2012 model year packers. We took delivery, they kind of came in a little bit staggered.
Yeah, I remember
Delivery of
that.
the first one in December of 2011, and the other 2 showed up in January of 2012.
I remember how all that happened.
Yeah. Just for what it's worth, so I'll throw it out. Industry average, and this is where the city kind of got into a little bit of a thing. 5 to 7 years is kind of expected service life out of the pack. It's kind of the industry standard. So we are approaching that. So if the city decides this is something to pursue, this is the right time to do that, to pursue it, because the conversation, the process of equipment replacement is coming up, it's coming due. So then naturally there's a decision, well, what kind of equipment? So if we want to pursue this is the time to have that conversation. This is the time to be thinking through that, because that can and will impact equipment decisions in the very near future. So yes, that stuff is due. And as you know, part of the reason we have 3 all at once, that's not ideal. Ideally, you have a replacement program where you're kind of shuffling a new one in every couple of years. And we simply fell behind on that. And the stuff was far, far beyond its service. 12, 15, 17 years old before we got it replaced.
And my last one, I know there's probably no trading value on these. this package we have now as opposed to what we would be buying. But the old ones that you had sitting behind the garage down there, are they still there? Did we get scrapped you out? Value?
Yes, they're
Okay.
scrap value there. And there is some, on our current Packers, there would be some trading value. That has not been investigated, but there would definitely be trading value on those Packers that are operable in service at this time.
And I know we deal with Steubenville trucking because we take a lot of our vehicles there.
Yes.
Larry might even be interested in purchasing a couple, I know that, I've already spoken to him, so there's another avenue if we need to be, if it needs.
Absolutely, and there's actually a kind of a, I shouldn't call it a sub-industry, but there's actually a secondary market. Just like there is for automobiles, there's a secondary market for these types of vehicles where there are some companies that specialize in kind of acquiring them, refurbishing them, and offering them for sale as used equipment. And there's
Smaller communities might want to.
Exactly.
We need to go to the mill, I mean, that's where we always go to Larry to get something for us, and he finds something somewhere.
Yeah.
He fixes it up, and that'd be like the same.
So in whatever form, there is value in the Packers that are currently in service, and one of the things we would need to do is find the maximum value by whatever avenue or means and pursue that, if we were to want to cash it in.
All right, thank you.
Both of these guys hit on a couple of my questions, but along with the how old were our Packers, I believe also, weren't they equipped with sidearm lifts? Or weren't we supposed to have them where they were adaptable to that?
They were equipped with tippers. They're not sidearms.
But the back ones, so those would be
Correct.
to lift the can.
Yes.
Okay.
And in the short term, we can, you probably recall, those trucks were ordered with those tippers. That was a minor add at the time of purchase. There was some conversation years ago about kind of moving in this direction. So when those vehicles were purchased, they were purchased with tippers. So that's something that we could utilize in the present. To be honest with you, some of them are in disrepair, and we have let them be that way because they're not really used because didn't really.
Then the next question, first of all, I am for this. I don't want this question to make it sound like I'm not. But we already have an issue. And it's been brought up more than once, more than 10 times a year, as far as the alleyways and the debris and the mattresses and the furniture. If we go to a situation, is that going to cause us more problems in those areas? I mean, you're telling somebody that maybe, and I know you said you weren't going to make them go from up on the hill to the front of their properties down below and do that. But there's already places up there that ignore our legislation and ignore our rules. What's this going to cause? And if we go that route, would we be able to? Because I believe that we should pick up what we see anyhow. And I've said this before, somebody said it last week, I can't remember who it was. But if our trucks are passing through an alley and there's 3 mattresses, we should pick them up. Somehow, some way, we should charge that resident. But my question again is are we going to cause more of a problem like that if we go to an automated system? People just say to hell with it and throw it anywhere.
I don't believe modernizing the process will affect that one way or the other. That's my opinion. I don't believe it'll have a positive or a negative impact on someone who decides to throw a mattress out the back door. That's a behavior. That's a personal behavior issue. It's more of an enforcement kind of question. Now, there's a discussion about you picking it up, and I'd like to have that discussion. One of the things, and this is where the economics of it kind of come in doing so, and this is maybe more of a potential issue for the future, looking down the road, just trying to be fiscally prudent. In doing so, all of us, all the ratepayers, are absorbing the cost for that. And so we have a bad actor, a person who does the wrong thing, and in an effort to do the right thing for the community, everybody absorbs the cost. So one of the things that might be worthy of discussion is as we two things. The little and loose stuff, I think, does get impacted positively. I do believe that if waste is containerized in a consistent way, a lot of the little litter, I'm going to call it litter issues, are addressed because you have less blowing, you have less animal problems, you have containerized waste. As you gain efficiencies and you get capacity and things like that, it frees up ultimately resources to maybe address those types of issues in a different way. Maybe then you have capacity within the sanitation department. I'm not saying we're there yet, I'm just saying, maybe you then gain capacity in the sanitation department to be more proactive, if you will, in, for lack of a better word, in the enforcement of the police and that, in documenting. I don't think anybody has an issue with picking something up. It's the drain on the fund that ultimately gets us in trouble. If we're absorbing costs for things and not getting reimbursed for it, we're not getting paid for the service. That's the key. So, also to that point, I think that with a more modernized collection process, and again, I don't want to get the cart too far before the horse, but it's a discussion unto itself. With a more modernized collection process and a different process, I believe that we then have the ability to handle bulk, big pickup, in a more aggressive, more proactive, more consistent way. So instead of having one bulk pickup a year, or possibly two, you have the ability to start implementing, and this is what most communities do, you have the ability to start implementing a consistent bulk pickup, where everybody's allowed to put out a bulk item or two once a week or once a month or on the second collection day of the month or something to that effect. Which, if you don't have to sit on it for a year, you can put it out. So, it's not a great answer, I'm sorry. I don't believe that implementing a more modernized process, I don't believe that changing the way that we collect and handle solid waste is going to directly, in and of itself, add to or detract from someone who chooses to do an irresponsible thing. But I think it gives us more capacity and more flexibility to get more creative in how we attack that problem, once we do.
Pretty much answer those.
Thank you. Anyone else have any other questions dealing with this?
Paul, just a couple of quick ones. First of all, it is exciting talking about updating our sanitation department. Although sometimes talking about garbage is not exciting, it really is. But you haven't touched upon the commercial accounts that we have and how that's going to fit into the plan. And also, are we considering down the road, or at least looking at and adopting some type of a recycling program along with modernizing the department?
Well, I would ask to address the second one first. As far as recycling, honestly, it's down the road. It's not something that happens from the beginning, but it's what it becomes possible. Right now, we're not positioned to do that. Right now, we don't have a good, solid process in order to address that. In order for that to work, as you know, carding is essential for that process. And you've got to make that process as simple for the homeowner as possible. It has to be just like putting out the garbage. And without carding, you can't do that. And without the equipment and the process in place to handle the carding, you can't do it. So I believe that if we implement a more modernized process and we have that system in place, automatically automatically then opportunities are presented. I don't think you can accomplish them all at once. I think it's secondary. It's phase 2, phase 3, whatever it may be. But once you have that, once you're doing it that way, once you have that process in place, and you're utilizing that method and that equipment and that parts, automatically, the discussion of curbside recycling is on the table, yard waste on the table, and that's where the environmental mandate thing comes in. Because as the world continues to spin, government regulations may very well start placing tighter and tighter restrictions on what can and can't go to the landfill, and what they want to see separated, and what they want to have happen with certain types of waste. So, envisioning that possibility, once we would have a more modernized process, and be doing it in that way, with that type of equipment, and that method, it's a simple process. If we want curbside recycling, it's basically simply, at that point, resident education, of course, communication, with the addition of another group. Yard waste, again, it's a different can. And that's where communities that have made this transition back in the 90s, that's where they are. They've got a can for waste, and they've got a blue can for recycling, and then they have a green can for yard waste. And everything's collected in the same way. It all just goes in different place. Now, and we can see it in our numbers, now you're not paying for that tonnage. When people cut their grass and put the bags, you're not paying money to dispose of that. You're not incurring those expenses. So all those types of things become possible. Commercial collection. We can, kind of goes with, we can, life for the commercial accounts, and you're referring to dumpsters, can remain unchanged, or we can simply start transitioning them to the front loader style and automate that process more. So we're currently servicing our commercial accounts with their rear load dumpsters, with rear load trucks, and the same crew of 3 who goes and collects on the route is servicing those dumpsters. And we can easily, I say easily, it requires the equipment and change, but transition those to a front load box and pick them up with one guy.
Don't you have anything?
I just got one statement. I've seen this work in Arizona, California. Clientele I had in my ward to educate them people. It's a long job. Hey, my only want to recycle with the beer cans.
Well, it's true, and
That's right.
I agree.
I ward in the hilltops.
It's a large component of successful program. There is some data out there, though, that, for what it's worth, I'd be happy to share with you. As I said, just about any community that's made the transition has encountered some difficulties and hurdles along the way. And there's some opposition and some resistance.
Right.
It's change, and people don't always like change.
Thank you.
However, those communities that have come out the other side of that and faced those challenges, the numbers vary, but it's usually somewhere in the neighborhood of about 95 to 97% approval. And the other 3 to 5% are indifferent, meaning that for whatever the struggles were in implementing the process and traveling that path and getting that done, and they are real. I don't want to downplay them or pretend that they're not there. They're real. But again, the data shows that once you've done that and once you've dealt with that, the reaction is kind of along the lines of, we should have done this 20 years ago, or what, geez, why did we wait so long? 95, 97% of the people that are doing it are happy with it, and the other ones, it's not that they don't like it, it's not that they're still opposed, they just don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other.
Okay.
So, but you're right. There's challenge and it's change.
process that's long overdue. The city should embrace it. We have the money to implement this process, and we should do it sooner rather than later, at no time like the present. And for all the reasons you said, that's why it's a great idea.
I agree. My only thing that I would say is if we're gonna do it, have a great plan. I don't wanna do a piece of it and then look down the line 5 years from now, oh, if we would have done this, then that, yeah. We need to do all of it. It's like all or nothing. I don't wanna do piecemeal, and because then it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work if we put all that for it. So.
Thank you. In summary, I think you can understand the committee plus council is in favor of this. Tim might implore you, everything Bob said, Mike disagreed to it, and I'm going to add my agreement to Mike. Aesthetics, all the positives that it could do from that standpoint to the economics, this makes a great deal of sense, and I agree with Mike. We need to dive in and get working on this plan of action. So I'm going to put that back to you. Ask if you have any other comments before we move into our next item.
Very quickly, we'll continue to update council each and every utility committee meeting, and I would anticipate we'll start seeing the first steps of the plan, certainly in the 2016 operating budget, and then in the 2016 to 2020 CIP. I think it's a wonderful time to map out where we need to go with this. Great, so I agree.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate your enthusiasm and your knowledge on this subject, and we look forward to the future with this. The next thing on the agenda, and I'm going to kind of like break this up a little bit, just go into, I think, something that's extremely important, and I know Lindsay's here and Chuck, and it's dealing with updating our water policy and actually bringing legislation to the board to actually get this in place. So, Tim, do you want to start, or I know we've already gone through all the changes, but let's just summarize them. And
I would start by turning it over to Lindsay and Chuck.
Lindsay, Chuck, whoever wants to go first.
Just go through that. Thank you. Like you said, we've already brought this to council, I think, last month and the month before, actually on the 4th, and then the meeting before that. The matrix really hasn't changed that much. Basically, we're just waiting on the approval to make all those changes to the policy. The only thing that was added to the matrix, there were delinquent accounts that were added. So you can see the decrease in delinquencies and also the accounts with no water. In May, we had a number of 104 accounts that were without water. I know that that was a concern in many meetings, which is, it's dropped. It dropped in June to about 81, and then just recently it went back up to 88 within the last couple weeks, and then it just dropped again to 84. So that number is going to fluctuate every day. We could run a report every day, and it's always going to be different depending on who we turn off that day and who gets turned back on, who pays their bill and who doesn't pay their bill. That is the 84 accounts out of 7,500 accounts. It's about 1% of people that have no water. A process and procedures have been set up to handle this issue. The information and data of people without water comes from our office. It's then sent to planning and zoning in an Excel spreadsheet. They send out what we decided is an informative letter to let the property owner know that possibly somebody is living there without water, or the actual owner of the property is there without water. Once there's verification that it's actually been occupied, then a second letter will go out stating that they're in violation of that code. There's a fine attached to that, which I believe is $250. I have to check on that. And once the letter's sent, they have so many days to get the water turned back on. If not, they are charged the fee, and they can be taken to court. Once it's taken to court, once it's verified that somebody occupies that residents, then one of the people who verified that information will have to go to court. We've actually already had one account that theft of water and living without water was verified by 2 of our meter technicians while out doing their routes. Affidavits were made up by Chuck, myself, and our 2 meter technicians. That was sent to planning and zoning. That'll go along with, so then the next letter will be sent to that person. It's going to be a process, but as long as the process is there and it's being done, we should see that number decrease.
If I can add, part of the problem is that when they come into court, you know, the court is either going to fine him, he's not going to be able to put him in jail. So they'll fine him and then they'll walk out of here and they still don't have water on. You know, the process we need is, we need our landlords to be evicting the tenants without water. I mean, we talked about this last time, Mike. When you look at the Landlord Tenant Act, it's clear there that, you know, a tenant has an obligation, you know, to have the services on. And if a tenant doesn't have water, that's gives the landlord a right to evict them. So we, you know, once again, it's these landlords, they should be evicting these people. We're giving the landlords notice too.
Right, so
That these people are in here without water.
Or is there anything we can do to the landlords? I mean, the Iowa Revised Code says the landlord has to supply running water.
Well, it says that, but it also says that the tenant has the duty to maintain it. So if a tenant, for whatever reason, doesn't maintain it, you know, then then it's grounds for eviction. Now, if it's under a landlord's contract that he has to provide water, and he doesn't provide water, then, you know, then a tenant can come in, you know, on a constructive eviction action to get the water turned back on.
Wouldn't we be stronger if we went to the Columbus, Ohio model, which they require it in the landlord, in the property owner's name, unless everything's paid up, and then they enter into a tenant agreement, they execute that. I mean, why don't we go to that model?
Well,
And
I
Columbus
think
is
at the end of the
one
day,
model.
I think at the end of the day, it still doesn't, you know what I mean, you know, get you to where you want to be is having water on in these places.
Well, in the places that don't have water, so the tenant's paying rent to the landlord?
They may be.
And why can't we bring an action to have that tenant pay us the rent and escrow it, and we take out the water? Because if you look at Golden at the end, in the notes, the court talked about there's many avenues available to the cities to collect that. And they talked about escrow, and they talked about Columbus changed their rules to allow a tenant that's going to get shut off to start escrowing his account. And the court even implies that they don't see why you couldn't do that also to start service.
Right, but that's for landlords that are paying the water bill in their name. And if the landlord pays it and then shuts the water, you know, for whatever reason doesn't pay it, you know what I mean, then, you know, the tenant can put it into an escrow to get the water back on.
I don't see why they're not to violate Ohio law. They have to provide their water. It's clear in the revised code. They have to provide water.
Well, no, well,
I can show it to you.
well, I know, but like I can show you where the tenant has a right, the tenant has an obligation to keep it on.
Well, why can't we use the Columbus, Ohio model of requiring the water in the landlord's name, in the property owner's name?
Well, because it flies in the face of Golden.
Which Columbus, Ohio lost Golden, and yet Columbus, Ohio is the one that requires the landlord. And Golden didn't say you can't put it in there. Golden came about because a lady moved into a place that had water, and it got shut off. Golden is a termination of service contract. That's what Golden actually is. Columbus, who lost Golden, continues to this day to require the landlord have it into their name. So how can they, who lost Golden, if anyone's going to follow Golden, Columbus, Ohio should follow it. Well, I think we need to call Columbus, Ohio and find out, despite losing Golden, you still require the landlord to put it in your name. Why is that, and what's the repercussions for that? I mean, is there anything against that? I mean,
Well, like I said, I have what Columbus is their agreement is there.
And I got it, I had it too.
And I've looked at it, so that's something that they have it in their rules, but then I don't know whether that was pre-Golden or after Golden. I don't know whether it's just in their rules that they don't follow it, but like I'll be calling up there.
I mean, if you go on their website today, it talks about, it said it's got to be in the landlord's name unless the bill's current and unless they execute a tenant agreement. And that's today, which is 10 years after the Golden decision. Anyone following Golden should be Columbus.
Well,
Gary,
but
if you could call the law director.
Yeah.
For Columbus. I think the one issue is we're plus 1%, we're up about 1%.
Right, and we're
Yeah.
seeing that number decrease already,
Obviously,
even before,
Have the right procedures in place.
right, even before the procedures have been in place,
It is
so,
something that is, we're getting a handle on, and it is going down.
right.
All right, plus, per what you guys want to do, is we're not allowing it to be turned on until it's paid. So which is the same, you have it covered
Well, you
there.
have concerns about that with Golden also.
Our big concern.
I know, so,
But-
when you call Columbus.
I don't want to discuss it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know, but just when you call
can
Columbus,
set-
Columbus continues to have that same policy, and they lost the case, so how are they getting around that case?
Well, like I said, I'll check that out, but like Tim said, we're only looking at maybe 1%, and the other thing is, you're going to have it in your policy where it isn't going to be turned on until it's paid.
Yeah, but we're gonna get sued for that also.
Well, I hope not.
Well, I think we gotta find out from Columbus what they're doing, why they're not following that part, or why they continue to do that. We should just follow Columbus.
We'll take a look at it.
Tim, obviously continue on with the things that you would like us to enact with this legislation. Thanks.
All right, yeah, and I guess Chuck and Lindsay, we have the legislation ready for it tonight. If it comes out of committee, sunshine it, we would, the administration to the point where we feel we have addressed the policies and procedures that council asked us to prepare. And in response, obviously, to the performance audit. That came down earlier this year. Chuck and Lindsay, anything else that you wanted to emphasize?
Well, basically, as far as things are concerned, this is, again, our recommendations to council, that they go ahead and sunshine tonight and pass. And essentially, just to go ahead and give a quick overview of it, as far as the changes, first one beginning page 6, letter H, single service line shall not be installed or used for the purpose of furnishing water to more than one customer, consumer, property or premise. If an existing water line serves more than one property, this service line must be changed. Essentially, we're going to go ahead and require that each individual property has its own service line, as stated in the last committee meeting, so that way we can eliminate the 2-on-1 situation. Mind you, we're not going after folks going out looking, but if you have a leaking service line, not paying your water bill, any kind of issue that comes up, and we find that you have a 2-on-1, you're going to be required to go ahead and actually have both properties coming out to the main as it ought to be, in accordance with this policy with letter H on page 6. Moving to page 7, looking at letter C, number 1. If there's an unpaid delinquent balance owed for water, sewage, and refuse service on a property, water service to the aforementioned property will not be provided or reconnected until the unpaid delinquent balance is paid in full, and that's what we were discussing just a moment ago. Moving again on to page 11, letter M. It's shut off for non-compliance with testing, repair, or replacement. Essentially, this portion allows us to go ahead and go in, change the meter, and if the resident refuses to do so, we reserve the right to go ahead and shut off water until such time as they allow us access to be able to change the meter and be able to have accurate counting for both the resident and for the city both. Then we move on to the next one. It'd be under Roman numeral 10. Looking at letter B, the utility billing supervisor. This is for the $1,000 cap limit for the utility billing supervisor that was discussed. Basically, below that, sewer charges for every 1,000 gallons of water that passes through a meter over the average monthly usage of the previous 6 months shall be billed based on the average cost per 1,000 gallons for sewage treatment for the last 3 years. This is going to allow us to go ahead and recoup our costs in terms of somebody has a water leak inside their house, it goes down the drain. This will allow us to recoup those costs so that we're not going ahead and harming the sewer fund as we have been. Then the numeral 1 is also incorporated with that. And then moving down to page 20, basically what we have here is the water service termination procedures. We have the procedures here, we'll follow those procedures. Basically, we have the note, that's the big change there. Utility director or water superintendent may at their discretion deviate from the above procedures for service termination and allows us some flexibility with oddball situations. But if we have somebody who's not going ahead and paying, we're able to go ahead and, or not find someone way that warrants a shut-off, we can go ahead and go about it in whatever means necessary. And then the only thing we have on the last part is just a slight change in terms of the final notice before disconnection. It has all the same information. It's sent to them in the mail with their billing
It's just
system.
it's just a different format
Right.
than what was previously sent in the past.
But everything else is exactly the same as the identical. Are there any questions on the changes?
No? Questions? Feelings on it? You know, your feelings on it? This is a good thing. Again, this is a good thing. Angie? Yeah, the committee is perfect on this. I'm going to open up any members of council have any additional comments on it. This will be sunshine this evening. Fire Utilities Committee.
Just want to thank Lindsay and Chuck for their
Yes.
Are the landlords being held or knowledgeable of the bills that they might owe for their tenants?
So, in the process, they're sent a delinquent notice as well. If the account goes delinquent, the tenant receives a notice as well as the landlord.
The landlords are receiving a notice that they owe or their tenants, yeah.
Right, and one of
Someone
the new things that we implemented was that when it's coming to the time that we're gonna lien properties, then a notice of intent to lien is sent before we would do anything, even start the process for lien, give them an opportunity to have a hearing in front of the water review
They get
board.
informed and they're aware of it, and they have no excuses.
Correct.
Thank you. That's it. So,
Good. All right.
I do have a question.
Angie,
Lindsay, explain to me the whole deposit process. I'm not familiar with it, meaning now we're gonna pay $275, so what happens?
If we're not gonna pay the $275,
No, if they pay the $275, what happens?
that's not part of one of the changes.
Okay.
The deposit's gonna stay the same. What we've decided is that increasing a deposit is a big change. And we're seeing that if the policies and procedures are followed, we're seeing an increase in revenue and we're seeing a decrease in delinquencies. We're seeing that the process is actually working if it's implemented correctly. So increasing a deposit as of right now, it's something that we can look at later if we still see numbers are not where they should be. But as of right now, it's not something that we need to look into right now.
any other questions on the new regulations of the sunshine? Going forward, Lindsay, while you're there, the update on the residential meter replacement, could you give us that, please?
We actually, Tim and I spoke about this earlier. The process is slowed. We're coming to an end of the process. And previously we had 2,000 accounts that hadn't complied within the city that we were still working on. The procedure that we will follow is that we're still calling through these 2,000 customers. That has to be done within our office and it has to be done in our spare time. We don't have the time for my staff to sit and that's all they do all day. We have 2 people at the windows that have to take in payments. They do it in their spare time. We also have one of our other staff members making those phone calls. So it's gonna take a little bit of time to get through all of those 2,000 customers. The plan is to call every single one of those customers, and make sure that we reach out to them before we even start a delinquent, like a turn-off, procedure.
Plus we have to have our policy in place too. It has to be passed in place. And we have a special provision in there.
Correct, for the Neptune.
Where we spelled it out in regards to these new policy, new meters, and if people don't put them in, we're turning them.
So that's also part of some of the changes that we've made.
That's that letter M, which it's referring to.
The process will be that we'll send them out a disconnect notice as we would any other person that we would disconnect water to. It would still have to be a 14-day notice. We do not have the manpower to go out if that number drops to 1,000, if that number drops to 700, if that number drops even below 700. We don't have the manpower with 2 people to go and turn all of those meters off or go in and shut the water off. Neptune has offered to help in that process. They will be helping us shut off properties, find perk boxes to shut people off so that we can get these meters replaced. The ultimate goal is to not shut anybody off. We don't want to even go down that route, but if we have to, then we will.
Plus, and the other thing, we already have one resident who has been sending us a lot of material about the radio waves that these meters throw out there and the extreme health hazard that's going on, but there are no known studies in America, that says this, but this guy is just sitting there, so we're.
Yeah, we are, I mean, there are gonna be people that we have to shut off.
Yeah.
We don't wanna do that, but that's gonna be the end result. There are gonna be people that just refuse to have it done, and we are gonna have to shut off water.
Okay, now, as they said, your office has to call them.
Right.
Is there any particular reason why we can't utilize the help of Neptune?
So Neptune is making those phone calls. They're also trying to reach those 2,000 as well as us. It's just kind of like we just want to make sure that we are exhausting everything that we can do within the city to contact them, to make contact with them, to explain the process. I think before we even move towards a disconnect, I think that's the best process to take with each individual account
As you
holder.
get later in the year,
Right.
Thanksgiving, Christmas hanging over their heads, wouldn't be a pleasant holiday season
Right.
without water.
And what we'll see is that number is decreasing. It may be slow, but it is decreasing. And we'll see, towards the end here, like I said, we will have to disconnect people, but we're hoping that number is small.
With any process that you get near the end, it gets a little more, to wrap up all of them, it becomes a little more difficult. Otherwise, they would have replaced them earlier. So
It's always
we have
easier.
to, work it, get it completed. We have a plan in place in case folks don't cooperate. We request to replace the good one meter. So we'll do that, but I think we have a process in place to get this completed. And we're, as reported last time, certainly seeing the results and benefits in our bottom line on water collections.
All right, just to wrap up, since Chuck, thank you, Lindsay. Chuck, just updates on water line breaks, any issues and any EPA mandates and where you're at with all that, just to wrap up the meeting. Thank you.
Well, water line breaks, we had a slight increase over last month. Last month, I think we had 8. This month, we had 10. You'll find it when you look at the sheet that was sent to you folks with the water line breaks since 2010. There's actually about 3 or 4, I think 2 or 3 new streets that haven't had any water line breaks since 2010. So it's some oddball stuff for the most part. And then, of course, some of the bit more familiar streets as well. We had a lot of breaks in the downtown area that was rather hairy, but the guys did a good job of going ahead and getting it taken care of. It all happened in a very short span of time, all in a matter of a week or 2. So anyhow, that's where we're standing at this juncture. As as far as the number of breaks for this month. And also, we need to note that we actually still are ahead of, below what we were in 2014. And I got to thank Mike. I must have been taking a nap for a moment there when I did my mathematics. It's a 41% reduction as compared to the same time last year. As far as dealing with the water line breaks issue, there's a grand total of, for 2015, grand total of 53 so far this year as compared to 108 last year. And basically looking at it, that's as a whole, and then looking at it time period versus time period, we are looking at a grand total of, pardon me here, 90 breaks at this time in 2014, from January to July 2014, as compared to the 53 line breaks between January and, it's actually January to August of 2014 as compared to January to August of 2015. So it'd be 90 compared to 53. So we are down at 41%. Apart from that, we've been trying very diligently to go ahead and stay on top of the high service pump issues, which have caused a lot of the line breaks, as stated in last month's meeting. A minimum of 11 have been caused by those issues with the high service pumps. Parts are ordered. We're expecting a delivery date of somewhere between November, I believe, 11th and December 18th for to go ahead and get those parts in, and then of course there'll be the installation that will take place after that. Which will also help with some of the dirty water calls, things of that nature we've been experiencing. Dealing with hydrants, our guys still only had 11 this past month, and we got a lot of line breaks. Columbia Gas, as you guys have seen on Sunset Boulevard, has been rolling really heavy and requiring a lot of time and effort from myself as well as the staff in terms of making sure that there's no interferences between their services and ours. So there's been a whole lot of line locations going on involved with their projects all over town. We're hoping that'll slow down a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead and we're getting caught up on the restorations between yards and streets, things of that nature. At one point in time, last week we had 17 restorations still to take place. That number has gone ahead and declined to 12, so we're trying to catch up on that after having all those line breaks and various service line issues, things of that nature. Dealing with, still looking at the hydrant flushing discoloration issues. I know that we've had a call on Alexander Manor, again, from the same lady, and in essence, got a call, interestingly enough, from Ohio EPA, Sarah Waltz. Apparently she had called them about this issue. Spoke to her, told her all that we're doing, which of course incorporates are going ahead and taking and having the leak location services go out there. We literally video inspected the sewer lines, seen if it was a water line break getting in underground that wasn't raised up. Also going ahead and taking turbidity samples to verify that there is actually a problem. There is a legitimate problem there. So forth, so on. And I had just gotten back response from a equipment rental company for a turbidity monitor. Yesterday, we're evaluating that monitoring equipment to see how we'll be able to go ahead and utilize that, and if it'll function as we need it to go ahead and be able to put it in the home of that property owner. We'll still need to have a conversation with her, make sure that she's okay with that. And of course, we'll have to work it out in terms of the billing aspects. Probably just go ahead and bill her the average usage is what I would suggest, because we're going to have a water tap in her house running constant until basically we see these spikes to see exactly when they're occurring, and then look at it in relation to activities at the filtration plant out in the system as far as changing directions of flows, things of that nature. So we can go ahead and get to the rhyme and reason of this and actually get it nailed down. Do be aware that anytime we get a dirty water call, somebody's called out, they go out, flush the lines, make sure everything's okay. So we are on top of it. EPA is very satisfied with what we're doing. They realize and recognize that we are doing the best that we possibly can and are being diligent in trying to resolve this issue. As far as the system evaluation plan, we're still in the same status as far as things are concerned. By the end of this month, we should have that preliminary report as stated in the last committee meeting. And then Looking at the water line replacements, I know that on Loretta Drive, they have gone ahead and done the pressure testing. I just got an email from Michael in the Rudzik stating that they passed pressure testing. And essentially, we've had the first round of the bacteria testing. It takes 2 rounds for it to pass. The second one comes through okay, then they'll be able to go ahead and move forward from there as far as making connections, things of that nature with service lines, so forth, so on. Also, let's see, that pretty much summarizes what we have there. There is one other tidbit in terms of the curb box issues. Lindsay and I have been working on those, generating a more specialized list so that we can go ahead and I can then sit down with the meter department personnel and evaluate these more closely on site, not just on paper, to see exactly what's what, to find out what we need to do to be able to go ahead and move these forward one way or the other. So we will try to go ahead and we are putting together a better mousetrap, if you will, to take care of that issue, and a better system for it. And I've already spoken with them preliminarily, so we will be going ahead and commencing with that very quick. Apart from that, you already heard about the theft of water and buildings occupied without water service. So unless there's questions?
Try to quickly finalize the meeting work.
Yeah, it just summarize, water line breaks, the number of those are down, number of delinquencies are down, water line repairs and replacements are up, hydrant replacement is up, policies and procedures are completed, number of meters replaced is up, the number of units occupied without water is down. So I think we're making significant progress. And I again, would like to reiterate and thank staff for all their efforts. Thank you.
This time I'd like to motion we exit the meeting.
Second.
We have about 6 minutes.